Good evening, YouTube, and welcome back to another edition of Paisano's Music and Vinyl Talk. I am your host, as always, Paisano. Tonight, we're going to talk about the bad boys from down under, ACDC, and their 1978 release, Powerage. This came on the heels of 1977's Let There Be Rock, and unbeknownst to us and the rest of the world, and even to them, this was to be their second to last album before lead singer Bon Scott tragically passed away after recording Highway to Hell. Bon Scott passed away in 1980. Highway to Hell was the last studio album with him. And it was a genuine tragedy. It's a story for another day. Very sad story. But, you know, AC/DC certainly persevered after that tragedy. What a long career this group has had. And this album is criminally underrated in the AC/DC catalog. And ironically, one of their worst sellers. I don't even think it sold 1 million copies even to this day. But, better days were to come. I mean, they're definitely on the rise here. Definitely in the early years of the group. And they got lead singer Brian Johnson in 1980. Their first album was Back in Black. I was lucky enough to see AC/DC twice. Once in 1986 and once in 1988. Both times in Massachusetts. Actually, the first time in 1986 was at the Providence Civic Center in Providence, Rhode Island. And the second time was at the Worcester Centrum in Worcester, Massachusetts, 1988. Both times with Brian Johnson, obviously. I was only 11 years old when Bon Scott died. Let's go over the track listing of this one. I should add that this is the first album with bassist Cliff Williams. Bassist Mark Evans, original bassist Mark Evans, was fired after a 1977 tour with Black Sabbath. Can you imagine that? AC/DC and Black Sabbath in 1977, obviously still led by Ozzy. What a show that must have been, huh? Wild. Wild, wild, wild. So they got Cliff Williams, and, all the rest of the guys were the same. Phil Rudd on drums, Malcolm and Angus on guitars, and Bon Scott doing the singing. Rock and Roll Damnation kicks off side one. And that's pretty much the only song you hear on the classic rock stations these days, which is a crime unto itself, because you could take just about every other AC/DC song and retire it, all the ones that have been beaten like a dead horse, and replace them with the rest of these songs on this album, and you'd be doing pretty good. Great, great album. After Rock and Roll Damnation, you have Down Payment Blues, Give Me a Bullet, and probably my favorite song in the album, Riff Raff. You always like the song that kicks off side 2, Sin City, followed by What's Next to the Moon, Gone Shootin', Up to My Neck in You, and Kicked in the Teeth finishes out side 2. The album's about 39 minutes long. The vinyl played very well. No obvious skips, jumps, major scratches. I probably bought this at Quincy Records in Quincy, Massachusetts, in the hard rock / heavy metal section that they had there. This came out on Atlantic. It was produced partly by Malcolm and Angus's older brother, George Young. He was a top-notch producer in Australia. He produced all the early AC/DC albums. This is recorded at Albert Studios in Sydney, Australia in February and March of 1978. Let's take a look at the vinyl. It's released on Atlantic, classic label. So many great groups on Atlantic. Great group, great record label. There it is, the classic Atlantic label. The green and the orange, multicolored Atlantic symbol. Let's take a look at the back cover. The front obviously depicts Angus being electrocuted. Powerage. looks like he has all kinds of volts running through him. Always a clown. Always a great rock and roll showman. Angus Young. The back, the band as they appeared in 1978. Angus up front. Yeah, like I said, all that was left after this is Highway to Hell, unfortunately. And I'll be reviewing that at some point. The last album with Bon Scott. Alright, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. If you're enjoying our discussions here, please like and more importantly subscribe. What will Paisano dig up next week? Tune in. Find out. Good night and thank you, YouTube.